Hi, I'm Whitney Espick, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hello, hello, and welcome everyone, wherever you are joining from. Thank you for joining today's Resume Revamp workshop. This program is being brought to you by the MIT Alumni Association. So my name is Peter Su, and I'm an MIT alum. I graduated in 2020 with my PhD from DMSC, or Course 3. A special shout out to my fellow MIT graduate alumni in the audience. I'm joining you all from Washington, D.C., and I will serve as your host and moderator for this event. I'm a current member of the Graduate Alumni Council, and our mission is to find meaningful ways for graduate alumni to connect back with MIT. I'm also a volunteer on the MIT Alumni Advisors Hub, a private online community that facilitates meaningful career and professional one-on-one advice from alumni to alumni. We are extremely pleased to have you all here with us. As we get started, please drop in the chat where in the world you are joining us from and your MIT course or department and class or graduation year, so we can get a feel for who's together in this session. And for those of you in the audience who would benefit from closed captioning, that can be enabled on your screen. Awesome. Love seeing folks drop in their information in the chat. And as everyone's introducing themselves, it's really nice to see that we're all connected as a community of undergraduate and graduate alumni peers, no matter where we are located. Now, please note that we have the questions feature turned on. We will be curating your questions as we go along to share with Heather during the Q&A at the end of the session. And you can help us out by upvoting what others have asked in the Q&A option down below. Now, we have lots to get to, so let's jump right in. So our presenter today is Heather Rothbauer-Wanish. Heather is a certified professional resume writer, member of the National Resume Writers Association, and the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. She's written thousands of resumes for a variety of fields for the past 15 years. Heather, welcome, and thank you for being here to share your expertise with us. I now hand the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm very excited to be here this late afternoon or evening, depending upon where you're coming from. I'm excited to see in the chat all of the different places that people are joining us. So I haven't seen anyone yet, in case I missed it, but I am coming to you from northwestern Wisconsin. So I'm in the middle of the country, in the Northwoods, so to speak. So hopefully I can share some wonderful resume revamp tips with you tonight. I am so passionate about resumes, so I will start sharing my slides and we will get started. And as Peter mentioned, feel free to use the question function because two of the MIT Alumni Association professionals are helping us with this, and they're going to gather your questions and we will have a Q&A session at the end. So I am going to share my screen, hopefully. Here we go. So I am going to go ahead and go through the screens or the slides here. Hopefully you can still see me in the corner, and then we will go ahead and get started with this information. So first, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about me. Part of this is just from me being a lifelong student. I like to know who is presenting and who I'm listening to. So my name is Dr. Heather Rothbauer-Wanish. Like I said, I live in Wisconsin. I am a certified professional resume writer, and I recently obtained my nationally certified online profile expert. That's a long name. NCOLP is the acronym. I recently went through that designation and certification as well. I have a PhD in organization and management with an emphasis in leadership. I also have an MBA, and then my undergrad degree is in management. So I do currently also teach college classes at one of the University of Wisconsin schools. So I was sharing prior to this starting that we've been talking about resumes for about 2 weeks. So I could literally talk about them all of the time. So I'm going to share some of those tips with you that I share with my undergrad students, as well as the tips that I share with my clients as well. So first of all, before we get started with the tips, I want to just chat for a second about the distinctions of an MIT alumni resume. Now, some of you are coming to this event as a fairly recent graduate, maybe within the last year or two. Some of you might be coming to this event with 20 years of professional experience under your belt. So we really want to think about what it is about an MIT alumni resume that helps you stand out. So one of the things I would suggest, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, is because you've gone to MIT and you're an alumni from there, I would strongly suggest listing that towards the top of your resume. And the reason I would do that is just because it's so recognizable and it makes a big difference to recruiters and hiring managers when they see that information. So sometimes it's pertinent to go ahead and list that twice on the document. It might be something you list in the heading, and then it might also be something you list in the education section. So we'll go ahead and get started. I basically have what I like to call 5 tips. Now, there are definitely subsections of each tip. So as we go through, I have a slide that shares the actual tip, and then I have a couple of examples. So the one thing I will share with you as we start to go through this information is that no 2 resumes are exactly the same. Writing a resume is both a creative endeavor plus a scientific endeavor. So you kind of have to mesh those 2 together. Ultimately, and this is actually the tagline I use for my business, ultimately, it's about giving you confidence during your job search. So whatever you end up with for a resume, you need to feel confident when you're sending that out to a potential employer. So we'll get started. So I like to call these my revamp tips. So revamp tip number 1 is to focus on the reader. Now, I understand that the resume is about you. Obviously, it details your educational background, your professional history, community engagement, special projects, maybe publications, patents, a lot of different things. So inherently, yes, the resume is about you. However, every single thing you put on that document needs to wind back to, why is this important to a potential employer? What is important to them? When I learned how to do a resume many years ago, and that was in high school, and we had, I don't want to say a typewriter because it wasn't, but we had a very basic computer and we printed on dot matrix printers. When we did resumes then, we were always told to include every single thing that you've ever done. Like, this is all of your work history. A lot of you are at the point in life, and myself included, where something that you did maybe 20 years ago isn't as relevant. So on this slide, you see like what is important to them. I worked as a bank teller in high school. That is almost 30 years ago. That's not important to a potential employer now, unless I was applying at a bank. If I was, I would include it. I'm not, most likely. So I do not include that information. So you really need to think about what is important to your reader. So I'm going to share a couple of examples here. Now, I've tried to change the information. I blew it up so it was large so you can see it on the screen. So this is an example of immediately telling the reader who you are. And what I mean by this is if I see Stephen Doe's resume here, bam, he's a quality engineering director. I know exactly what he does. He is not an accountant. He is not a pharmaceutical sales representative. He is not a CEO. He's a quality engineering director. I was just at a resume writing conference for about 3 days. You're probably all jealous you didn't get to attend with me, but it was good. It was exciting. I enjoyed it. But it's a resume writing conference for professional resume writers. And one of the gentlemen speaking to us is also a recruiter. He said he glances through a document for about 4 to 6 seconds. And if he doesn't know who you are immediately, like what you want to do, you're out. You're out before he even scans the rest of the document. So doing something like this helps identify immediately who you are. So you'll also notice in Stephen Doe's resume, we have some career highlights here that talk about, and we'll talk about this too, some keywords like he's proficient in leadership, he's an excellent communicator, he's great with negotiations. So immediately at the top of this document, the employer is starting to see how Stephen might fit into the role that he's applying for. So I have another example here as well. So Lisa's a customer support manager. Now, the job she was applying for specifically called for being empathetic to clients and to the people that they were serving. So we purposely put that into the little summary at the top. Now, some of you might have noticed on the tops of these resumes that we do not include an objective. Now, you will read a variety of things about that. I can tell you when I learned how to do a resume, you put an objective on the top. And it probably said something along the lines of, experienced quality engineer seeking an opportunity to further my leadership skills and expand my continuous learning. That's all about you. That's about the person that's applying for the job. So that's why we don't include an objective any longer, because we want to start focusing on the keywords, the words that are used in the job posting. How are you going to benefit the company? Because that's what they care about. So one of the sub tips of this is make sure that if you currently have an objective on your resume, and even if it says the word objective, I would eliminate that. Eliminate that and start to give yourself some sort of title. Give yourself more of a career summary, because immediately that allows the company to see how you would fit in with their organization. All right, revamp number 2. Focus on your achievements and accomplishments. This is so important because what a lot of people do with their resumes is they will copy and paste their job description or the list of job responsibilities. And I am here to tell you that your job description, my job description, and probably almost everybody on this call, your job description sounds like a lot of other job descriptions. It's not super specific. So you have to think about what sets you apart from others and what did you achieve in your job? Okay, here's your job description. Here's your responsibilities. We're just assuming that's the baseline for your position. But what did you achieve? So you did XYZ. Here's what became of it. You ended up increasing you ended up increasing the accounts by 50% profitability within 12 months. That's an achievement. So anytime you can add percentages, dollar amounts, numbers is a fantastic way to catch the hiring manager's attention as well as the recruiter's attention. Just think about the way that you read. When you read a book, you read a newspaper article, you read something online, your eyes automatically go to the numbers. Your eyes go to the numbers and the symbols. So if there's any way that you can quantify your information, that is extremely helpful. Now, I will tell you, it's easier to do that in some jobs versus other positions. If you're in a sales or marketing role, you will most likely have numbers and percentages and dollar amounts that you can share. if you're in education or a doctor, are you going to say that you worked with 32 patients on a Tuesday? Probably not. I'm an instructor at college. Am I going to say, I provided, 32 A's, 10 B's, and 3 C's last semester? No, that's not relevant. But I could say teach 6 separate courses, each containing approximately 30 students that are either sophomores or juniors. That's a lot more specific than I teach college classes. So what I want you to do is to start thinking in those terms. How can you be more specific, and how can you quantify what you do? It is not about your job description. It is about your achievements and your accomplishments. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. So this was somebody who worked for a government agency. So the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. He was a CIO, so Chief Information Officer. So what we quantified was like the number of employees that he oversaw, the dollar amount that he managed with his budget. We even put the years in here for the strategic plan that he had worked on. Even saying, if you'll see that they transitioned to a different type of electronic medical record, even mentioning that went to 7 separate 24-hour, 7-day-a-week facilities is important, because you are going to go to that immediately with your eyes, okay? That's a lot different than saying, I led the IT bureau and all employees in it, as well as oversaw the budget. Okay, well, was the budget $10,000, $10 million? No, actually, it's 35 million. And it wasn't 10 employees, it was 162 employees. So it just has a different feel when you can provide some of that quantitative information that really, really focuses on your achievements. So I'll show you another example as well. So, and again, that's a little pixelated just because I blew it up so everybody could read it. So this person was a senior marketing executive. They achieved a senior marketing executive position. Now, if we left that first bullet point like that, we'd say, oh, that's great. As a recruiter, as a hiring manager, good for you. That's great. But when you think about it and say, one of only 1.5% of individuals to reach that level, okay, that's a game changer. That is completely different than saying you're really good at marketing. So even things like that, if you can somehow quantify that, 96% retention rate over a 14-year career, talked about $1 million in sales, grew a team of approximately 20 individuals. You don't have to be exact with this information, but what you can do is say, approximately 20 people or 20 team members or whatever the case might be. Even in a substitute teaching role, you might think, well, there's nothing to quantify. There is. You can talk about the fact that you were a substitute from pre-K through 12th grade. You also had classes somewhere between 20 to 38 students. So you know how to manage time, you know how to manage a classroom, you know how to lead different personalities. Think of all of the ways that translates over into another career, because that's one of the most important things as well. So this is just 2 examples, but really start thinking about these things. And I will share just quickly one example from one of my undergrad students a couple of semesters ago. Now, granted, a lot of them are working summer jobs, to earn money, not their dream jobs. And one of my students said, well, I really didn't do anything there, but I mowed the lawn. I mowed the lawn, I took care of the course. Okay, great. So is that what we're going to put on the resume? You mowed the course. No. So I started asking him questions, and that's what you need to do. How large was the golf course? How many acres is it? Is it private or public? Was it just you? You were the only one that took care of the course, or did you work with a team? So I don't remember the exact amounts, but what it ended up being was something along the lines of cared for, 15-acre private golf course while working closely with 15 crew members. It was something like that. But that's a big difference between that and I mowed the golf course. So that's kind of how I want you to think of things. The other tip I would give you with this, and I don't have it on the screen, but if you can't tell, I'm very passionate about resumes, is don't just yourself. So one of the things that a lot of people do when they're writing their resume, whether it's this person, the previous one, or somebody else, they'll say, well, at this job, I just did this, or they'll only themselves and they'll say, or I only did that. So if you kind of have that thought process in your mind, I encourage you to start thinking outside of that. You didn't just serve as a marketing executive, or you weren't only a substitute teacher. You did amazing things in those roles. You did amazing things as a quality engineer. So that's what you need to focus on. All right. So if you're taking notes on the computer or on a piece of paper, I'm somebody that still likes to write a lot of things down. I just want you to think about these 3 questions. What is one thing that you are thinking of right now that you can quantify? You don't need the number right now or the dollar amount, but maybe it's like, I do manage a large budget. I need to find that out. I'll give you a little trick too. Some of you might be in positions or industries where you can't share information. You can't say that you have, $2 million in sales or whatever the case might be. If you're in one of those positions and you can't share that amount, maybe you can share the change. Maybe you can say grew sales or grew client base by 52% over a 3-year period. That's not sharing any proprietary information. So think about what is one thing you could possibly quantify. The other thing I would encourage you is really think about, if somebody asked you in a job interview, what is the achievement that you are most proud of in your work history? And focus on that, because you can tell a story about that in your resume. You can use a CAR story, so CAR, so challenge, action, result. Here was the challenge, here's what we did, this is the result we received from doing that. So really start to think of those things. And honestly, it's good practice for an interview as well. And then what did you do that made a difference? That's the other thing you need to think of. Again, thinking outside of, here's my job description. What did you do that really made a difference? And focus on that. Okay, revamp number 3. Focus on keywords. And I know I can't see all of you, but I'm assuming a lot of you have heard of Applicant Tracking Systems. So a lot of you have probably heard of them. Some of you may not. So I understand it kind of runs the full gamut. So sometimes you'll hear it called Applicant Tracking Systems. Sometimes you'll hear it called Applicant Tracking Software. Either way, the acronym is ATS. And this is a huge deal, especially if you're not familiar with how it works. So the idea is, once you're applying to companies, specifically larger companies, they don't have somebody sitting on the other end of Indeed or LinkedIn or wherever site they're using to post their jobs. They do not have somebody sitting there going through, 200 resumes that come through for this position. So they have software that is scanning all of the resumes coming in. And what happens is if your document doesn't match a certain amount of words that are used in the job posting, you automatically go to the no pile, the digital no pile, and you won't ever hear anything. And how you'll know this is if you start applying for jobs when you've read the job description and you think, oh my goodness, I am the perfect person for this job, and then they never call you. That is how you will know if you're missing this, because I have worked with, I don't know, hundreds of people that will say things like, I've been applying for these jobs. I know I could do these jobs, but I don't get any calls. Honestly, it has nothing to do with them. And it sounds funny, but it's nothing personal, but it really isn't. What it is that they don't have keywords in their resume. So I'm going to show you how that works. You need to match the job posting as closely as possible without literally copying and pasting. So the example I have on the screen, but I'm going to show you a couple of examples in a minute, is if you had project management listed on your resume, either in your career summary or a skills section, but you're reading the job posting and it talks about the ideal candidate must have project leadership capabilities, you're going to want to change that verbiage on your resume to say project leadership capabilities. So it can just be little tiny tweaks like that that can make a huge, huge difference. So once you understand this, it's like, okay, great. How am I supposed to figure out what the keywords are? So I'm going to show you. So I was just looking online earlier this week for several jobs just to kind of have an example to show here for you. So this section said what you will do in this position if you get it. So you can kind of see it talks about business development, selling design and development services. Kind of if you go through each bullet point and take maybe the first little phrase. So medical business development, identifying market and customer trends. The third one, developing a this is pharmaceutical, but developing a pipeline, developing a sales strategy, communicating that business strategy, building strong relationships. If I was doing a resume for this person that wanted this job, those would be the skills I would list. So I would say, these are my core competencies. Here are my areas of expertise. Identifying customer trends, building a sales pipeline, establishing relationships, communicating strategy. That is what I would use for my keywords. Now, I will also share, which I'm 99.9% sure no one on this call would do, but sometimes people put words on there and skills that they really aren't skilled in. They will put them on there just to match the words. We don't want to do that. Whatever you put on your resume is fair game during a job interview. So whatever it is that you put on there, if you tell them that you're really good at developing customer relationships, high profile relationships, you need to have an example, because in a job interview, they're going to ask you, give me an example of a time when you did that. So everything on the document is fair game, but that's one example of finding the keywords in this posting. So I'll share another one. This one's a lot simpler, and you can, when I read something like this, the keywords are literally like jumping off the page at me. So this one would be leadership skills, management skills, strong financial acumen. We would talk about communication and interpersonal skills. And then we'd also talk about working as part of a team. So in job postings, when you're looking at them, you need to pay attention to a bulleted list, something that will say under qualifications, or something that says like knowledge, skills, and abilities required, or even requirements for position. But if you can hone in on those keywords, it will make a huge difference as you're applying for new job opportunities. So now you're thinking, this is how I think people are understanding this information. Great. Well, I don't know where to put this on my resume, so I'm going to share that with you. And again, these are just examples. There are many different ways to do this, and it completely depends on your field, your experience, and the position. But what I like to call this is the skills section. It doesn't matter if we call it skills and qualifications, if we call it areas of expertise, if we call it core competencies, we might even call it career highlights. It's your skills section. The reason I share this with you is because this is an easy way for you to tweak your resume each time you send it out without having to reinvent the wheel every single time, because I'm assuming most of you don't want to do that. So as you can see in the first one, I'm not sure how many we have there, probably 9 to 12, give or take. But this is how I build a skills section, because I can put a lot of skills in there in a very small space on the document. And the reason we want to do that is because the more skills you can have in there that match the job posting, the better your odds of getting through that ATS system. So these are just a couple of examples, especially like in the bottom one. So when it says account management, maybe the job posting asks for account leadership. I would change it to that. Maybe they mention creative problem solving. I would probably add creative problem solving. Maybe instead of saying organized and detailed, it's asking for somebody with high attention to detail. I would literally change it to say attention to detail. So I will show you another example. This one's set up a little bit differently, This is somebody that I worked with a few months ago that happens to be a certified peer recovery specialist. So he has a competency section, but he also has a nice career summary that starts focusing on those keywords like relationships, building a rapport with what he is doing. That's majorly important. Goal attainment, being supportive. So these are two areas that are typically on the top of your document, and they're the easiest places to make those changes. And I will tell you one other thing. The recruiters, what do they look at first? They look at the top part of the document. That's prime real estate. So if you want to get somebody's attention, you need to front load the information and put it here. It just makes sense. So we won't actually do this on the call, but again, if you're taking notes in a document or writing, a couple of tips for you. If you're thinking about looking for a new job opportunity, but you're not doing it like right this minute, what I would do is keep a file, save it to the cloud, but keep a file of like job postings that are in your industry. Whether or not you want to apply for it now doesn't really matter. The point is that you will start to understand the trends with the keywords. As long as you're applying for kind of the same types of positions, those keywords will stay pretty consistent. Also, you want to think about what are some common keywords that are used in your industry. So somebody that's in engineering, you're probably going to have a section or some keywords that focus on technical programs. Somebody that is in maybe a different role, maybe you really have to focus on certain certifications. And then the other thing that I will tell you is always think about, is your skills section set up in an easy way for you to modify? Because the problem is if it's not easy to modify, if your document gets a little finagled when you do that, you will likely not change it. And that's definitely something we don't want to see happen, because you do need to change it when you send it out to job opportunities. All right. Revamp tip number 4. Formatting ideas. I could talk about this idea for hours. So the first thing I will tell you is don't use large blocks of text. I don't know about you, but for me, most of you have, gone through a lot of different schooling and different certifications. If you opened a textbook or you saw something and it was just a huge block of text, most of us don't get really super excited about reading that. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples where I like to call them snippets. Like, you make it so easy for the person to read it. A snippet, snippet, snippet. Here's a couple bullet points. Here's a short summary. So we don't want to use large blocks of text. At the same time, we don't want to get too fancy. So there's a lot of creative templates out there, a lot, and they look really, really cool. But if they don't work through the applicant tracking systems, it doesn't matter, because you're not even getting to a human being. So we need to be careful with the formatting we're choosing. Number 2 is stay away from commonly used templates. So whether it's something you find in Canva, whether it's something you find in Word, they both have a lot of templates. You need to be careful with those, because what ends up happening is that your document looks like everybody else's. I'm going to share in a few slides the format I see all of the time. I swear I see it like 3 times a month when somebody sends me a resume, because it's one of the first ones that pops up in Microsoft Word. So you want to stay away from those. And I'll show you a couple of reasons why. Number 3 is, even if you're in a conservative field, maybe finance, maybe a legal field, technology, those tend to be a little more conservative. You can still use a little bit of color, even if it's a dark blue, a dark green. Don't be afraid of using a little bit of color. Now, I'm not saying, use 3, 4, 5 different colors on your resume, but it really helps your information stand out. So I'm going to show you this one. And now, if somebody on this workshop has this resume, please, it's not intended to make anyone feel bad. This is just one of the templates that pops up in Microsoft Word very quickly. So a lot of people choose this one. Why do people choose templates? Well, a couple of different reasons. They're easier. They think they're easier. I would argue that point. They think they're easier and was like, oh, everything's there. All I have to do is drop in my information. But I will tell you something. If you look at this document, the skills section is towards the bottom. It also talks about activities. Now, depending upon your activity, that may or may not matter to a potential employer. That might even be a section you don't need, okay? The other thing I will tell you specifically about this template is each of those sections is a text box. So when you go in there to try to change something later on, like the job title or the company, everything moves. It's very difficult to delete information in these templates, and sometimes it's very difficult to add information and maintain the same formatting. So from my own experience, I can tell you I don't work with any of these templates. I have my own that I've made up. I don't typically use text boxes or anything like that because I know what works through applicant tracking systems. And when I work with somebody, I want them to be able to make changes on their own. So you want it to be easy to use. The other thing I would tell you with this one, which is kind of an interesting little bonus tip, is if you look under education, it says month and year and then the degree title in the school. Now, after a certain point, I remove the years of graduation from school. In fact, the only time I include a college graduation date is if somebody graduated from college last Saturday, it doesn't have any professional experience. I graduated with my undergrad degree in 1999. I am not putting that on my resume. I've worked with people that have graduated from college in 1985. Great, that's fine. But they're just so stressed on making sure that they put that year on there, and you don't need to. You really don't need to. So I would encourage you, once you have professional experience, putting the year of your education isn't really important on this template. There's some other things too that can be changed with this, but I wanted to show you another one as well. So if you don't get anything out of this whole workshop, if this is the template you're using, I just encourage you to do something different because this is like one of the most common resumes that recruiters see. Now, this is an online template that I just pulled out of Canva, and honestly, like it looks great. It looks professional. It looks good. The thing with this one is it has a box or a circle for the person's photo. Now, in the United States, so I will preface it by saying that in the United States, we do not put a photo on a resume. And that is simply because of either intentional or unintentional, perhaps, discrimination. Oh, this person's a little bit older. They're going to want more money. We'll probably skip that person. Oh, this person's a little bit younger. They probably don't have the experience we're looking for. I think we might skip that person. Oh, this is a woman applying. This is typically we always have had men in this position. Now, I'm not saying it's that blatant, but it can happen. So why would you put something on your resume that would perhaps hinder you in whatever way there is for potentially landing an interview? So if you have a photo on your resume, I would remove it. Now, I always get the question, well, my headshot's on LinkedIn. Yes, it is. That's just a different platform. So we do have photos on LinkedIn because we're trying to make those personal connections. However, with a resume, they're supposed to be looking at your education and your skills and your experience. So be careful with online templates because sometimes they are including things that really aren't necessary and don't need to be included within a document. So here's an example I'll move this over. Here's an example of a resume that I did for somebody a while back. It's very plain, but it's a good example. She actually ended up getting a position as a principal. So this person, we talked about who they are at the top. Boom, I know this person's in education. They are not in accounting. They are not a salesperson. Education. Then we talked about skills and qualifications into the professional history. And then you'll see we did not include any dates of graduation on their education section. Here's another example. This is the whole resume of the one little snippet that I showed you before. This is just another example. Now, as an alum of MIT, I would put education up here, like how this one is more prominent to the top. His is actually there because guess what? He just graduated with the certification, so he doesn't have a ton of professional experience. That's why we put it towards the top. So just keep that in mind. You can do things with color, different symbols or sort of design in the heading, but no pictures and things that are simple that get through those software scanning systems, because that is so, so important. This person actually ended up getting his first certified peer recovery specialist position, and it moved because he wanted to move as well. So he ended up getting a position that he was looking for. This is another example, just a little bit different. So talking about some different things this person has done. The reason I'm showing you this is that I want to show you not every single resume is the same, but they kind of all have the same components. So this person graduated quite some time ago. This was actually a 2-page document, so the education was at the end. Again, if it's something where you recently graduated within the last year or two, I would definitely bump that to the top. And because of where you graduated from, I would also list that a little bit more prominently as well. All right, so I'm checking the time, make sure we don't go over. So revamp tip number 5, potential extras to add. So all of the things I've talked about previously, they're all like, you have to have those things. You have to have your professional experience. You need to have a skills section. Obviously, you're going to list your education. You need a summary at the top. These are extra things that you could potentially add as an MIT alum, as a postgraduate, maybe doctoral student, or maybe a dissertation, things like that. So you could add any specialized projects. Maybe you have a section at the top that says, project highlights or selected career highlights. Again, we're never saying that we're telling our whole entire professional story. We're hitting the highlights and we're hitting the relevant information. Don't send out a long resume just because you can. It needs to be relevant. Sometimes we can show leadership examples. So if you're a leader in a professional association or some sort of organization, maybe you include that. Maybe you include some community engagement or volunteerism that's important to you. That's important to a lot of companies, to know that their employees give back. So these are kind of extras to add, and I do have some examples here for you. So somebody that I was working with, we really wanted to focus on his unique value proposition. So we talked specifically because he had breadth of experience, but he also had depth of experience. So we used that. This was right towards the top of his document. We also talked about key offerings and strengths. So we looked at all the skills he had, and then we decided to break it down into those 4 items and then explain them a little bit more. So again, look at all of the keywords we can put here. This is keyword rich, and this would allow you to get through software systems. This also allows you to just match the job posting, even if you're not applying online and you're handing it to somebody or you're emailing it to someone. This is just another way for you to align as closely as you can. Here's another example of somebody that had quite a bit of community engagement. He was looking to stay within the area that he was currently located. So it's a nice thing to do to say, hey, I'm already in this area. I'm here to stay. Look at all the ways I'm involved. So we put the years on there just because even though they were over, it showed longevity. It really showed longevity at several of these positions. This is another one. So one of the things I wanted to point out as well is other professional experience. So if you have experience from 25 years ago and you're like, this is important, or I want to put that on here because it stands out, it's notable. You can call this heading earlier career history, and you can list those jobs and omit the year. It's as simple as that. This person had some additional experience we wanted to highlight, but it wasn't necessarily as important as the more recent experience, so we just listed it. Also, if you're in a tech field or a software heavy industry, you can have a whole section that talks about your technical skills or software skills. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this. extra section to think about. Again, you don't have to have these, but if you do, sometimes they're nice to add to the document. So last little note-taking thing here before we wind up and go through the questions, I really want you to think about, like, what is maybe one of those additional sections that you could add to your resume? Is it publications? Is it speaking engagements? Do you, have you been involved with an organization as a volunteer for 20 plus years? Maybe you can list some of that. Really think about what will help you stand apart, because there's competition. There's competition for all the positions that all of us are applying for. Why should they hire you versus somebody else? And really focus on which items are relevant. It really does come down to that. And that ties back to like the very first or second slide when I said it's about the reader. Like, which items are relevant, not to you, to the reader. And sometimes when you're writing your own resume, it's very hard because it's all important. But is it? You kind of have to start thinking that way. So in conclusion, I have 2 things for you. Remember that your resume is yours, so you can decide what to include and not include. And the other thing is, and again, I can't say this enough, when you send out your resume, you should be confident. You should be confident that they're going to call you for an interview. So a nice, good, well-written resume will give you that confidence, hopefully, to make sure that your job search is very successful. So I have my contact information here. My name, phone number is on here. I do believe they will also be sending out a recording of this in addition to that. My email address is on here. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn all of the time, sharing resume tips and different ideas. I'd love to connect with you on there. My website's on there as well, but I would love to stay connected with anybody that is interested in staying connected with me. I'm very passionate about resumes, so I'm happy to chat further if and when it's needed. So I am going to stop sharing. I will keep my camera on, and then maybe we can see if there are any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather, for the presentation. Very, very helpful. Seeing the time, I feel like we should just dive right into questions. So the first question that folks are really interested in is, since the LinkedIn profile is so key, how do we tailor a resume for each job if recruiters just want the LinkedIn profile?
Sure. Okay. So if recruiters just want the LinkedIn profile, it will have to be a little bit more general, because you're not going to go in and change your LinkedIn profile all of the time. What I would suggest with that is building individual connections with recruiters and, saying, please feel free to review my LinkedIn profile, and then also sending them maybe a LinkedIn message with a PDF of your resume that you have specified to a job opportunity. I think that's one nice way to do it. The other thing you can do with your LinkedIn profile, and not a lot of people do it, take advantage of it, is in your headline underneath your name. On LinkedIn, your headline automatically defaults to whatever your current job is. So if I'm the manager at ABC Company, it says Heather Rothblair-Wanish, manager at ABC Company. Use that space in your headline to talk about you, not your current job. So mine says something like certified professional resume writer, focused on giving you confidence during your job search. And then I have some other keywords in my headline, which is what shows up in searches. So that would be my advice for that. Make sure you're not tying yourself to a company. Make sure you're tying yourself to you.
Awesome. Thank you. So there's a couple of questions that are tied to sort of a length of experience and how to sort of deal with that. So I'll just sort of list them all out, and then you can sort of address them as helpful. So one of them is, when you've had a long tenure at the same place, what's the best way to break down multiple roles at the same company? Another one is, I've had a few career switches in many jobs, so I recently truncated my resume to 1 page, focusing on my last 5 years with top brands with relevant experience and put, for experiences prior to 2018, refer to my LinkedIn with a link to the LinkedIn profile. Is that a good or bad idea? And then there's a couple of questions related to length that are tied to the ATS. So would you recommend, since ATS is a bot, like how can you make the resume really long to add in all the keywords, or does ATS stop scanning after a certain length? And just sort of how do you sort of judge the length that you should make your resume, taking into account the fact that an ATS might want a bunch of keywords?
Sure. So a couple of things with that. So length of the resume, I feel like that's an ongoing discussion all of the time. So a lot of people will say, oh, use a one-page resume. If you've worked for 20 years, it's going to be very challenging to have a one-page resume, nor should you. So I would suggest if you've been working for 10 years or more, you're probably going to have 2 pages. Anything beyond that probably isn't being read. Anything beyond that can be sent as a separate addendum, or you had mentioned maybe having a line on there that says, please contact me via LinkedIn for additional information or something like that. So typically when I'm working with clients, 2 pages max. Now, if somebody's in a medical field or an educational field and they need more of a CV, that's different because that can start to get a lot longer in length. But I would try to stick to 2 pages because remember, your resume, the goal of your resume isn't to get a job. The goal of your resume is to put enough out there to get an interview. That's what the resume is for. So you don't need to put everything on it. You need to put enough interesting content on it in order to get the call or the email or whatever it is for the job interview. Most people can sell themselves once they get into the interview. So the resume is like the conduit between, I know I can do this, I just need a chance. Like your resume gives you the chance, which is the interview.
Awesome. So next set of questions are around quantifying achievements. So, what do you suggest if you don't have any way to easily quantify your achievements? And also, how do you distinguish between the individual versus the team? So if you have like a sales number, but that's for a whole team, how do you sort of claim your value?
Right. So what you could do in that instance is say, as a key player on the XYZ team, formulated $2 million in additional sales from such and such a date till present. Or you could say served on a team that did XYZ. I don't think, you don't have to downplay that you were on a team, but at the same time, it's like you want to include that information because you played an integral role, most likely. So you could just say something like that, as part of the marketing team, here's what we did. Or as part of the project team, assisted with the merger that ended with $2 million windfall or something. I also want to go back to the person that mentioned having longevity at one company, but a lot of different positions, because I feel like that's something a lot of people battle with. So what I do in those instances is I focus more on the more recent jobs that you've had within that company because they're probably more relevant. Again, that depends on the situation. And then what I would do, so let's say you worked at a company for 20 years and you've had 7 different jobs, okay? I would probably focus on the more recent 2. As you go back in time, what I do is say, like United Airlines, technical advisor, we talk about that. Technical assistant, we talk about that. The further you go back with those positions, they can get shorter and shorter. And then if there's still like 3 that you're like, oh, I want to include these, just put a note, put a sentence and say note. Also served as a blank, blank, and blank during time with United Airlines. And then you have it covered, but you don't have to talk about, your entry level position.
Awesome. I want to do a quick time check, seeing how cool. All right. So we have time. So next question then. We're just going to keep pounding through them. How do we manage gaps in our resume?
Oh, gaps. Well, this is a great question. So if you have a gap in your resume, first of all, it depends how long it is. Second of all, it depends what you were doing. So I've worked with somebody recently that had to take 2 years off to care for an ailing parent. Like life happens outside of work. I think we all know that. So if you had to take 6 months off or a year off because of some personal thing going on, I tell people like identify that in the resume. No, I'm not saying you have to give the details or anything, but you could just say from 2019 through 2020, took a step away from professional career to care for family member. Or somebody we said took a sabbatical from career trajectory, to care for somebody or to take care of kids, things like that. Life happens. So I think just identifying it and just putting a little one-line thing in there is fine. Now, I would say if you had a gap of 3 months, I don't know if that you have to address that necessarily. The other thing you can do is if you've had short stints at positions, instead of saying like January 2023 through June 2023, you could just say 2023. So that kind of minimizes it, makes it look better, I guess is what I would say. But don't be afraid to address a gap, because we know there's gaps. I mean, look at the last 3 or 4 years here. There's a lot of people that have gaps. So I think if nothing else, I think the last few years have allowed us to be more understanding of those gaps.
Awesome. So another question is around formatting and the ATS systems. But in your experience, does it matter if it's a PDF or a Word, and also like how a PDF might be created? For example, a lot of folks from IT tend to use LaTeX, or are able to use LaTeX. Did you see that ever affecting the ability for an ATS system to actually read the resume and properly process it?
No, if it's a PDF, it's a PDF. So it wouldn't matter which program you use to save it. I always tell people just follow the directions. Like if they ask for text file, make sure you send a text file, which not a lot do, but do what they say, because so many people don't follow the rules. That's like the first part of the job interview. So I typically would tell people to send a PDF, just because then you don't lose any formatting or anything like that. But if they ask for a .docx file, Word file, then send that. I also think a PDF is good in case you're using like Google Docs, or if you're using like Canva. Canva will automatically save things to a PNG format. No employer is asking for a PNG format. So you just need to pay attention to what they're asking for and follow those guidelines.
Awesome. What's probably going to be the final question, unless we can sneak another one in. So this one is around age. So how can you sort of hide your age in your resume if we're specifically looking at people who are, in their 70s or like very old and therefore might face age discrimination?
Right. So this question bothers me, because that we even have to talk about it bothers me, but we do. So one of the things I would tell you is, do you want to work at a company where you have to hide your age? That's the first question I think you have to ask yourself. One of the ways you can do that, though, is honestly, with anybody, typically we only include about the last 10 to 15 years of job history. We don't include all the job history. So if you're not listing those earlier jobs, there's no way they're going to know. If you're not listing your graduation date from college, how are they really going to know? Now, if they jump on LinkedIn and see your profile picture, they might have a better idea. But I always tell people, like, first of all, do you want to work at that company? And shouldn't they be valuing your experience anyway? That's kind of how I think about it. But age discrimination definitely happens. So we try to do little tweaks here and there, so we're not, blasting all over our exact age, but at the same time, experience should be valued.
Awesome. We might actually be able to sneak one more in. So question, do you think any of the premium services for getting out resumes are useful? So premium LinkedIn, Job Finder, etc. And if so, which are helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the LinkedIn Pro Finder is helpful because a lot of recruiters are on there. So I definitely think that's one. I also think, partnering with a recruiting firm or a headhunting firm might be a good option as well. It really depends on your industry. I would look at whatever industry that you're in and figure out, kind of the popular sort of firms within that industry. I worked with somebody yesterday that, Korn Ferry has contacted him several times, and he hasn't been ready to make a move, but now he's ready to make a move. So I said, reach back out to them. So what I would say is try to build some of those relationships before you need them, even if you're thinking about possibly looking for a different career move down the road.
Awesome. Well, thank you all and because that's all the time we have. So thank you, Heather, for staying on a little bit longer and for sharing your methods and actionable strategies today. On behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, we are grateful and appreciate you for bringing your insights and advice to our alumni around the globe. And thank you to all our alumni viewers for tuning in. And as a reminder, today's webinar will be recorded and available within 2 weeks from today's broadcast. Thank you again for joining, and have a good evening or morning or night or whatever. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.